hanzi tinotanga nekuti pamusoro yevaridzi vedunhu chivhata makadizve. The Honorable Deputy Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, Honorable M.T. Mazunye, with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Mrs. Binyemba. Can I see your hand, Binyemba? Thank you. Chief Mchani Kumalo, the President of the Council of Chiefs, we are honored by your presence in our midst. The Deputy Chairperson of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, Mr. Kiwa, all commissioners of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission here present, all commissioners of the Chapter 12 commissions here present, the chairperson of the Lesotho Electoral Commission, my brother there, representative of the EXCO chairperson, all representatives of political parties and CSOs here present, the staff of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor to welcome you all to this National Stakeholder Review Conference following the conduct of the 2023 harmonized elections. Like all election review processes, it had been intended to hold this conference much earlier on in the year. However, this could not materialize due to a number of factors which were beyond the control of the Commission. Be that as it may, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is pleased that its desire to have such a conference has now come to fruition. The 2023 harmonized elections presented a challenging task to the Commission as they were preceded by the delimitation of electoral boundaries, which is also a daunting task on its own, which was done and completed in the year 2022 of the electoral cycle. The conduct of both the delimitation exercise and the election was no mean task, and it drained a lot of energy and resources from both Commission personnel and the country's fiscus. Election practitioners know that each election comes with its own challenges and that there is no such thing as a perfect election. The context in which an election is held also influences the perceptions of stakeholders on the outcome. In the same vein, the 2023 harmonized elections were held using new electoral boundaries demarcated by the Commission. Today, we will look at what went right and what can be improved to minimize conflict before, during, and after elections in the future. You as stakeholders had different views on the delimitation exercise, and this was evidenced by the fact that some of you sought legal recourse to challenge the outcome of that process. Such conduct is permissible and is consistent with the objectives of a democratic society, and we as election administrators are legally bound to follow judicial precedent and due process. Again today, with your kind assistance and cooperation, we will look at what went right and what can be improved. Elections are conducted in terms of a given legal framework promulgated by the legislature. The Commission upholds the same framework in line with the constitutional dictates of the country. While it is trite that the Constitution in Section 239 mandates the Commission to conduct all elections in Zimbabwe and to ensure that elections are conducted efficiently, freely, fairly, transparently, and in accordance with the law, it is this legal framework that the Commission is bound to follow to ensure that it is complied with. All challenges to the conduct of the Commission must be based on the given framework and not conjecture. The differences we have as stakeholders in the electoral process in Zimbabwe are perpetuated by our failure to correctly diagnose the problems in order to prescribe efficient solutions. We urge stakeholders to share with us their expectations on how elections should be conducted in future. The purpose of this review workshop is therefore not to point fingers at one another, but to brainstorm and to come out with proposals on how we should reform our processes so that they meet your expectations, you the shareholders, the stakeholders. It is standard practice in election circles that a review process often leads to electoral reform. Electoral reform is a broad term that covers, amongst other things, improving the responsiveness of electoral processes to public desires and expectations. However, not all electoral change can be considered electoral reform. Electoral change can only be referred to as reform if its primary goal is to improve electoral processes. For example, through fostering enhanced impartiality, inclusiveness, transparency, integrity, or accuracy. In deliberations, we must also pay regard to the fact that some changes may be characterized as desirable or even necessary reforms by their proponents, but as improper manipulation by their opponents. In other words, they will always be opposing views. Random and or frequent electoral change, while it may be reformist, can also be confusing to voters and defeat its purpose. Frequent change may also negatively affect the sustainability of the EMB's operations. According to electoral authorities, there are three distinct areas of electoral reform that the EMB and its stakeholders may play different roles in each. These are legal, administrative, and political. The legal includes amendment of the Constitution, electoral law, and or related rules and regulations to enhance integrity. An adequate legal framework enables the EMB to deliver its services. Under administrative, it may involve the introduction within the EMB of new strategies, structures, policies, procedures, technical innovations to enable it to implement its legal responsibilities and deliver its services more efficiently, effectively, sustainably. Under political, these are changes that take place in the political environment within which an EMB operates, such as giving it more autonomy or creating a more effective and transparent framework for its funding and accountability, amongst other changes. It's important to note that while an EMB has a key role to play in all electoral reforms, it may not be in a position to implement reform without the support of its key stakeholders, particularly the governance, legislative, and political components. This is a significant reason why EMBs should maintain a strong relationship with their stakeholder. Section 5 of the Electoral Act gives the Commission, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, additional functions and powers. This section provides that in addition to the functions set out in Section 239 of the Constitution, the Commission is also responsible for undertaking and promoting research in electoral matters, developing expertise and use of technology in regard to electoral processes, promoting cooperation between government, political parties, and civil society in regard to elections, keeping the public informed about various electoral issues, ensuring the mainstreaming of gender into electoral processes, and making recommendations to Parliament on appropriate ways to provide public financing for political parties. Therefore, all stakeholders have a robust legal obligations which member states must comply with. Today, we hope to address issues that give rise to criticism towards our electoral processes. In doing so, we should always remember that we did not get our independence on a silver plate. The price of today's democracy was the blood of the brave sons and daughters of Zimbabwe who decided to take up arms against the then white settler regime. Therefore, we need to guard our hard-won independence and freedom jealously. This can be achieved by making progressive reforms that guarantee a good future for generations to come. It is trite that elections are not a war but are simply a process that we have chosen to use to select our leaders. There is therefore no need for elections to divide our nation into camps. As the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, we call upon all stakeholders to put differences aside and to decide for our nation what is good for it and for its future. We have Zimbabwe to protect, and we all need to come to the table to deliberate and make framework propositions that improve our electoral processes. As we move forward, we need to dwell more on our strengths while we endeavor to address issues that divide us as a nation. We are here to listen to you and to correct any misconceptions that may have been peddled during the electoral processes. We also need to take cognizance of the fact that we have already lost some time in terms of the electoral cycle. There is need to prepare for the 2028 harmonized election, and this begins now by reviewing what we have completed in the past. In conclusion, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission will not take lightly the deliberations of this workshop. We will consolidate the recommendations and submit them to our line ministry, which is the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, for possible inclusion in legal reform. However, as we have already stated, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission's mandate is confined to making recommendations. We do not have power to make legislation, propose bills on our own behalf. Our mandate must be understood. It's limited to making recommendations. This is where the rest of the stakeholders come in. If you see that the proposals that come out of today's review process do not make their way into electoral law, as it were, and you look to your elected representatives who are in Parliament and perhaps ask them to account to you as to why those recommendations have not made their way into law. Parliament, of course, operates on its own rules and regulations. Some call it democracy, some call it the tyranny of the majority. Whatever you call it, what comes out of Parliament is what the Electoral Commission will implement. However, we are heartened by the fact that we have the esteemed Honorable Deputy Minister of Justice there. We have the Permanent Secretary who makes everything move to Parliament. We have the esteemed head of one of our critical stakeholders, the Chiefs Council. You can see they're sitting there, they're listening, and hopefully they will take our recommendations and what comes out of today's deliberations very seriously, take it all the way through, take it to Parliament, and in the hope that disputed elections will be a thing of the past in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening.
Let's give Justice Chigumba another pam-pam. I'm just being reminded, and I think this has happened to almost each and every one of us. Have you ever been in this situation whereby you are looking for something desperately? You look for it, you're looking for it and that kind of a thing, only to realize that it's right before